Do you want to create an SMTP server? If yes, I want you to really watch this show from beginning to the end because I'll be sharing with you a few hacks to really simplify your operations, simplify things for you. So here are the generalities here. If you think about SMTP, you're thinking about the mail server. You're thinking about, let's say, compliance. You are thinking about vulnerability, sort of protection against vulnerabilities. Okay, so basically, you have to understand that most communication between individuals and organizations, actually, this communication is done via email. And so, using Google Workspace, for instance, and on your own domain, you can significantly improve your email deliverability rate, especially if you are in an industry where data security is actually critical. And I mean, there are still some companies and individuals who would like to have more control over their infrastructure, including their own email servers. Okay, because you do not want to really have some kind of interruption, especially if you are in an industry where your operations must be running 24/7. Okay, and one thing I want to say here is that when you think about SMTP, think about Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. This is actually an email server that's responsible for sending, receiving, and routing emails. And the main difference between SMTP and cloud-based solutions lies in the way your email service handle messages. So something to really keep in mind. So that's important. I'm showing you on the screen here what the whole process really is for SMTP, right? Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. I want you to look right now how things actually start from the sender. Okay, you have the sender mail service, you have the internet, and then you have the receiver mail service. And the SMTP actually connects those two. Okay, the sender mail service and the receiver mail service. So for you to actually go through, if you set up a SMTP, if you set up your SMTP properly, you want to pay attention to your POPs3 IMAP to really be able to route messages back to your receiver. So SMTP is an email communication protocol that's used by mail servers to send emails from one account to another via the internet. So when it comes to setting up an SMTP mail server, I want you to really understand that with a standalone SMTP service, your emails travel from your relay host to the recipient's mail server without any third-party involvement. This is important if you are trying to really infuse an extra layer of security, if you will. And so one thing I want to say here is that when it comes to standalone SMTP services, you have a couple of options. You have self-host, so you can self-host your own SMTP server. You can use existing infrastructure. You can use any third-party SMTP provider. Okay, but everything depends on your operations. So just don't forget that you can host your SMTP server on a virtual private server, VPS, or a dedicated server. This approach requires more technical expertise as well as enough resources to actually support the increased traffic. In terms of using existing infrastructure, if you already have a website, for instance, you can use its web hosting account to set up and manage your emails. This is actually the most common and recommended approach for small businesses with little or no expertise in terms of technical expertise. You can use a third-party SMTP provider. So this solution actually combines the best of both worlds by providing you with extra servers that are easy to set up and manage without sacrificing any of the features of flexibility. So you can see on the screen here, how do you choose the best server for your business this year, the best SMTP server? You have the shared server, you have the VPS server, and then you have the dedicated server, right? So you see that what's really important. Just remember that large email service provider or mailbox providers such as Gmail, Yahoo, and Outlook filter the message according to IP addresses and domains, which may affect your email deliverability. So it's always a good idea to follow emails to an established SMTP relay server. So you can say relay versus no relay on the screen here. Okay, what kind of contrast you have? You have the info that goes from the sender all the way to the recipients. Okay, and you have a what outgoing mail server, SMTP relay server, and incoming mail server. Actually, those pieces of equipment plays in the whole process. So SMTP relay is actually the process of routing emails to the proper destination SMTP server. That's what you want. On top of that, configuring your application to send emails is a smart actually is a smart technique, if you will, because you want to really improve deliverability. You want to improve stability. And you want to do this in a scalable manner. Now, let me talk to you about the steps actually involved in setting up an SMTP server. Because setting up an SMTP server may sound like daunting tasks, but if you have any experience with hosting a website, the process should be actually a breeze. So, assuming that you want to set up your own SMTP server from the ground up, you will need actually a server with a domain connected to the internet, either a VPS or a dedicated server. Once you have the basic infrastructure in place, you have the possibility to get things done faster. You will need to install and configure appropriate software such as Postfix for Linux or SMTP's IIS SMTP server for Windows, and that's kind of important. So, in terms of SMTP relay, you gotta have the right relay provider. Okay, so you can actually sign up for a server that helps you big time in terms of creating some kind of stability to your server. And so the standard configuration procedure for SMTP is actually pretty simple. Pretty simple. You want to choose account settings from the tools menu of your email client to access the account settings voice menu. You want to choose, and that's the second step. You want to choose the outgoing server SMTP option. You want to click the Add button to configure a new SMTP. Once you have everything done, the following window will appear. So you can see on the screen here, that's the window that will appear. Number four, you want to simply fill the voices with the following description: the server name, the port, right? So usually SMTP works with port 25, but as the you may have, your situation may be different. You want to think about connection security, authentication, and the username. Now, the username actually is your email address. Authentication method, there's a certain number of methods. It can be passwords, it can be a CRAM MD5, Kerber, operating system, etc. If you think about SMTP mail server this year, you have to pick the right server. Okay, choose the right server for your business. I mean, one thing I want to say here is that if you are, I mean, there are two main options when it comes to mail servers. You have Windows and Linux, and if you are not familiar with either of these platforms, opting for Windows server may be a better idea because the platform is designed for businesses of all sizes and comes with a user-friendly interface and a multitude of apps all in one package. On the other hand, Linux is a more versatile platform that can be used for a wide range of purposes, including SMTP servers. And the main advantage of Linux is that it allows you to have virtually unlimited customization, which can be a blessing and a curse. It depends on what you really want to think about, right? While you can tailor the server to your specific needs, the process can be complicated and time consuming. And so be aware of that. And you got to have the skills too, though. You got to have the skills. And additionally, Linux servers may actually turn out to be more expensive than their Windows counterpart in the long run because you may need to invest in additional software or support to get the most out of your server. So something to really think about. Now, setting up the server, basically, if you are using Windows, the process is relatively straightforward. All you need to do is add the SMTP server feature in Server Manager. More specifically, you need to enter the Add Roles and Features menu in the Manager app. Select role-based or feature-based installation and follow the wizard, choosing the server you want to install the SMTP server on. And in the list of available roles, check the SMTP server and restart the destination server automatically if required. When completed, you can move to the SMTP server configuration. Now remember that Server Manager is the management console that helps IT professionals provision and manage both local and remote Windows-based servers and servers, Windows-based servers. Okay, so on Linux, the process is a bit more complicated because there is no one-click installation wizard. The first step is actually to install Postfix, the most popular open source SMTP server for Linux. The process varies depending on the distribution you are using, but eventually you need to update your server to ensure you have the latest packages, let's say, required for the installation. Okay, you got to have the most up-to-date files. You have to install Postfix using the package manager included with your distribution. You have to configure Postfix to use the loopbacks interface and start the server and add it to your firewall rules. So one thing I want to say here is that when you build SMTP mail servers, you have to also think about configuring them. So let's talk about configuring the SMTP servers service this year. So after the server is up and running, you need to configure the SMTP service to start sending emails. And if you are using Windows, all you need to do is open the Internet Information Services Manager, the IS Manager console, and enter the SMTP virtual server settings. There you should set up the four following things. You have email relay host, outbound security, TCP port, and smart host. So email relay host, typically you enter a localhost IP 127.0.0.1 to route your emails through the local server. And if you are using a third-party SMTP relay, you will enter its IP address or domain name in the smart host section. You also have outbound security, so you want to choose which authentication method you want to use. If your SMTP relay doesn't require any authentication, select anonymous access. Otherwise, you can use password-based authentication, integrated Windows authentication, okay, or TLS encryption. You can also have TCP ports. So you want to enter the port that's open in your firewall. The default port of it for SMTP is 25. I said this a little earlier, right? 25 is the default, but you may want to set up another port for testing purposes. And you think about the smart host too. So the smart host is used for external exchange and relay servers, and depending on your network and internet service provider. So you may need to have a different IP address or domain name on Linux. And so everything I told you, that's for Windows. On Linux, the process is similar, but most of it happens in your text editor. Assuming you are using Postfix that I mentioned a little earlier, you need to edit a few files in the etc. Postfix directory. Okay, so that's something to really think about. So if you are looking for, let's say, building an SMTP mail server this year, you have to test your configuration. That's really important, especially if you are trying to make sure everything works, let's say, in an impeccable manner. So once you have your server configured, you want to test your setup, okay? The most common way to do that is by using Telnet to select and send a text email, which can be used on both Windows and Linux, okay? So that's kind of cool to think about using Telnet in that capacity. So the process is relatively simple. All you need to do is open the Telnet client and connect to your SMTP server. So you have 4 typical steps that you need to follow if you are trying to really configure your server appropriately. First, you want to connect to your SMTP server. Next, you want to identify yourself to your target server, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't work. You want to set the sender and recipient email addresses. And finally, you want to enter the message you want to send and end the session, right? Everything has to be, you want to test things that you want to see a like a trial and error sort of scenario. Assuming the configuration is set up correctly, you will receive a positive response from your server. After sending the message, if there are any errors, you should actually troubleshoot your configuration and try again. And you gotta really try until you get things right. Okay. Now, sorry. If the session ends with a success message, you can now start sending emails from your own email server. One thing I want to say real fast is that your own email server will you will depend also on the needs that your business has, right? What kind of email server do you have? And by the way, do you want to cover a specific geography, or you don't really care? The whole world is fine. If you want to cover a specific geography, maybe you're thinking about the business operations that are close to your main center of operation or your headquarters. If you have a larger organization, then your needs will be different. That's an important element to think about, especially from a scalability point of view. One thing I want to say here also is that depending upon the SMTP mail server and bulk email operation that you have to understand to plan your cost in a scalable manner. So the more you grow, the more you have to pay. So be very scalable in your budget, the same way you are scalable with the SMTP settings. So basically, you have to understand that you have to think about maintaining your own SMTP server because unfortunately, there are not many things in this world that are permanent. Okay, things keep changing. And even when it comes to IT, you can't just set it and forget it. Okay, while it may seem so, your SMTP server is not actually a, a, a simple process. So just like any other piece of software or hardware, your server will require, let's say, maintenance regularly to keep it running smoothly. However, this is not to say that once you set up the SMTP service, you'll have to dedicate a significant amount of time to managing the server. Conversely, if you follow the best practices and use a reliable server, the maintenance should not require more than an hour or two per week, often embedded in your overall server maintenance service. So just be thoughtful about that. Now there are two main pain points when it comes to SMTP servers. You have security and performance. The first one is relatively easy to solve, right? If you follow the proper security protocols that I've shared with you into this conversation, you should have no trouble keeping your server safe. Again, your SMTP server is a part of your local network infrastructure, so the same rules apply. As for performance, things are a little more complicated. Although sending emails is easy for modern computers, scaling actually an SMTP server to handle, let's say, increased traffic is more complicated. It requires more steps. For example, if you plan to send mass emails, you may need to schedule them accordingly or invest in additional hardware and software, such as a crashing server or a content delivery network. You can also use SMTP monitors that periodically test your server's performance and identify potential issues. Common symptoms of a poorly configured server are high latency and delivery failures. So if you, let's say, experience either of those issues, you should investigate your SMTP settings and make informed decisions necessary. So think about like the impact on your business operations and how you want to fix the problem. So basically, one thing I want to say here is that into this conversation, to actually set up, here's a coda. So into this, I spoke to you about how to build SMTP mail servers and send bulk emails. Okay, so I gave you the generalities, the steps. So in terms of the steps, you have a setting up the server, and picking the right servers too. Okay, setting it up, configuring it, testing it, and maintaining your own SMTP server. So, in today's conversation, I spoke about that as well. Thank you so much. I will see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.